Enough, Mom. Stop embarrassing us. I never thought my own son, my flesh and blood, would dare to slap me, his vicious hand cracking across my face at my 68th birthday in Franklin, Tennessee, shattering my heart into a million jagged pieces as the room's mocking laughter burned my soul. Unearthing a 33-year secret I swore I'd take to my grave. I never thought a birthday could feel like a funeral. But there I was, sitting at the head of a polished mahogany table in the Willow, Franklin's fanciest restaurant, surrounded by faces I barely recognized. The chandeliers cast a golden glow, but it couldn't hide the truth. Every smile was a mask. Every clink of crystal wine, glasses a jab at my heart. My 68th birthday, and I was drowning in a sea of whispers and sidelong glances. James, my son, sat across from me, his tailored suit screaming success, but his eyes, cold as the January frost, avoided mine. Lydia, his wife, perched beside him, her diamond earrings glinting like knives. Their kids, my grandkids, scrolled through their phones, oblivious, their faces lit by screens instead of candles. The air was thick, like the Tennessee humidity before a storm. I tried to lighten the mood, leaning toward Lydia with a smile. That necklace of yours, Lydia, it's stunning. Reminds me of one I sold back in '92 to buy James his first car, a beat-up Chevy that got him through college. My voice was warm, nostalgic, but Lydia's face tightened, her lips curling into a smirk that could curdle milk. She leaned into James, whispering something I couldn't catch, her manicured nails grazing his arm. That's when it happened. James shot up, his chair scraping the hardwood floor, and barked, "Enough, Mom! Stop embarrassing us with your old stories!" His hand flew, and the slap landed. Sharp, searing, a betrayal that burned deeper than the sting on my cheek. The room froze. Lydia's laugh sliced through the silence, high and brittle, like glass shattering on tile. A few guests chuckled awkwardly, their forks hovering over untouched plates of pecan-crusted salmon. Clara Hayes, my oldest friend, gripped her napkin so tight her knuckles went white, her eyes blazing with a fury I knew she'd unleash later. My grandkids didn't look up, but I saw their shoulders tense, caught in the crossfire of their father's rage. I touched my cheek, warm and pulsing, and felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, but a dam holding back 33 years of silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at James, the boy I'd raised, now a stranger who'd rewritten our story to make me the villain. Lydia leaned back, sipping her wine, and said, loud enough for the table to hear, "She always has to make it about her, doesn't she?" The words landed like a second slap, and no one, not one soul, met my eyes. Not the neighbors who'd known me for decades. Not the church ladies who'd eaten my peach cobbler at every potluck. I smoothed my dress, a navy silk I'd ironed that morning, and forced a smile, the kind you learn after years of swallowing pain. But inside, a storm was brewing, and it wasn't just about that night. It was about a secret I'd buried in 1992, a choice that cost me everything. As I sat there, the weight of that memory pressed down, pulling me back to a night when a phone call changed my life forever. As I sat there in the Willow, my cheek still stinging from James's slap, the chatter of the birthday crowd faded, and my mind dragged me back. Back to a night in 1992 when a phone call shattered my world. I was 35, a single mom scraping by in Franklin, Tennessee, working 40 hours a week at the county library, stacking books and dreams just to keep the lights on. It was close to midnight, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. The phone rang, its shrill buzz cutting through the dark like a siren. I picked it up, my stomach already twisting. "Mrs. Brooks," a gruff voice said, "you need to come to the station. Your son's in trouble." My heart sank like a stone in the Cumberland River. James was just 12, barely old enough to ride his bike across town, and now he was in handcuffs. I threw on a coat over my nightgown. No time for shoes. Just slippers slapping the cold linoleum as I grabbed my keys. The drive to the Franklin police station felt like a lifetime, the streetlights blurring through tears I didn't let fall. When I got there, James was slumped in a metal chair, his skinny frame swallowed by a too-big jacket, trying to look tough but shaking like a leaf in a storm. The officer didn't sugarcoat it. "Possession with intent to distribute," he said, tossing a plastic bag of white powder on the desk. Cocaine. Not a joint, not kid stuff. Enough to land James in juvenile detention, maybe worse. "He was running errands for some older kids," the officer said, his eyes hard. "This could ruin him, ma'am. Felony charges. No college, no future." I looked at James, his eyes pleading, not for forgiveness but for a way out. I didn't think, I just acted. "It's mine," I said, my voice steady as granite. The officer blinked, his pen frozen midair. "Excuse me?" he said. I repeated it, louder, like I was swearing an oath. "The drugs are mine. He was driving my car. I forgot they were in there." The room went so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second carving a piece of my life away. The officer leaned back, skeptical. "You sure about that, Mrs. Brooks? We can run your record." I nodded. "Go ahead. I've never even had a parking ticket." He did, and it was true. My clean name was all I had left, until that night. They let James go with a warning, his record untouched. Me? I got a $2,000 fine, a mark on my name, and a one-way ticket out of my job. The library board didn't care that I wasn't charged. "We can't have whispers," they said, handing me a pink slip like it was a condolence card. I paid the fine with my savings, every penny I'd tucked away for a rainy day, and Franklin turned its back on me. Neighbors stopped calling. Church friends crossed the street when they saw me coming. I'd walk into the Piggly Wiggly, and the cashier would avoid my eyes, like I was a criminal instead of a mother who'd traded her future for her son's. James? He came home, tossed his backpack on the couch, and asked, "What's for dinner, Mom?" Like I hadn't just set my life on fire to save him. I never told a soul. Not my sister, not my pastor, not even Clara Hayes, though she'd have held my hand and brewed me coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I thought silence was love. I thought sacrifice meant swallowing the pain, smiling through the ashes. But that night in '92 carved a wound that never healed, a secret I buried under years of packed lunches, late-night shifts, and checks I wrote for James's dreams, his college, his first car, his life. He never asked what it cost me, not once. And sitting there at the Willow, 33 years later, with his handprint burning my cheek, I realized he'd forgotten it all. Or worse, he didn't care. That realization hit harder than his slap, a blade twisting in my gut. I looked across the table at Lydia, her smug grin, at my grandkids, lost in their screens, at the guests who laughed like my pain was a punchline, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The weight of that night in '92 was clawing its way up, demanding to be heard. As I gripped my napkin, my fingers trembling, I felt Clara's eyes on me, steady and fierce. She knew something was coming, and so did I. The sting on my cheek hadn't faded, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me as I sat at that birthday table in the Willow. Franklin's glittering cage of pretense. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the pecan-crusted salmon, it all felt like a cruel stage play, and I was the fool who'd forgotten her lines. James's slap wasn't just a blow. It was a declaration that I was no longer his mother, just a shadow to be swept aside. Lydia's smug grin, sharp as a switchblade, cut deeper than I thought possible. I excused myself, my navy silk dress rustling as I stood, and made my way to the restroom, desperate for a moment to breathe. My hands shook as I gripped the porcelain sink, staring into a mirror that showed a woman I barely knew. 68 years old, eyes hollowed by decades of sacrifice, a heart fractured by the boy I'd saved. Through the thin vent in the wall, their voices slithered in, low and venomous. Lydia's tone was ice cold, calculated. "She's slipping, James. Did you see her shaking? We can't wait for her to fade naturally. A few calls, a doctor's note, and we can declare her unfit. The house, the savings, $200,000 at least, it's ours." My breath caught, sharp as a fishhook in my throat. James chuckled, casual as if they were planning a Sunday picnic. "You make it sound so easy, Lydia. But she's stubborn. She won't sign anything willingly." Lydia's laugh was soft, intimate, like they were toasting my demise. Then we push harder, a little paperwork, and she's out of our way for good. I froze, my fingers digging into the sink, the pearls around my neck suddenly heavy, like a noose. They weren't just betraying me. They were plotting to steal my life, my home, my dignity, as if I were already dead. I thought the slap was the worst of it, but this was the knife twisting, carving out the last piece of hope I'd clung to. I remembered the years after 1992, after I took the fall for James's drug charge. Franklin turned on me like a pack of wolves smelling blood. The library job I loved, gone. My friends at First Baptist Church, who'd praised my peach cobbler, started whispering behind hymnals. "She's not who we thought," they'd say, their eyes sliding past me at the grocery store. I'd walk the aisles of Piggly Wiggly, picking up day-old bread to stretch my budget, while neighbors turned their carts away. Mrs. Larson, who'd known me since James was in diapers, once crossed Main Street to avoid me. I stopped going to book club, stopped volunteering at the church bazaar. I'd sit alone in my 200-square-foot house, the mortgage paid off with my late husband's life insurance, counting pennies to keep James in school. I'd sold my mother's silver candlesticks to cover his first semester at Vanderbilt. When his car broke down, I skipped dental checkups to pay for repairs. Every sacrifice was a brick in the wall I built to protect him, but he'd torn it down with one slap, one laugh, one whispered plan to take what little I had left. I looked at my reflection, the lines etched by years of silence, and felt something snap. Not break, but snap, like a bone resetting itself. I wasn't their vault to crack open. I wasn't a ghost to be erased. I was Eleanor Brooks, the woman who'd carried their shame for 33 years, and I was done. Clara's face flashed in my mind, her fierce eyes at the table, her hand gripping that napkin like she could strangle the injustice with it. She'd always seen me, even when I'd stopped seeing myself. I thought of the night I'd poured my heart out to her, years after the police station, when I couldn't carry the secret alone anymore. She'd kept it safe, not just in her heart, but in a cassette tape, tucked away like a grenade, waiting for its pin to be pulled. I straightened my spine, adjusted my pearls, and walked back to the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood like a war drum. Lydia was still smirking, James sipping his wine like nothing had happened. But something had shifted inside me. The truth wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. I walked back to that table in the willow, my heels striking the hardwood like a gavel, each step pounding out the years I'd let silence choke me. The sting of James's slap still burned my cheek. But it was Lydia's venomous words, overheard through that bathroom vent, that set my soul ablaze. Declare her unfit. Take the house, the savings. Their plan to bury me alive in my own life wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, cold and calculated, like picking the pockets of a corpse. I sat down, my navy silk dress creased, but my spine straight as a Tennessee oak. Lydia's smirk flickered. like she sensed a shift in the air. James sipped his wine, oblivious, while my grandkids tapped away at their phones, blind to the war brewing in my heart. Clara Hayes, my anchor in this storm, locked eyes with me across the table. Her gaze, a silent vow. She'd stand by me no matter what came next. I didn't speak, not yet. I let the clatter of forks and the hum of polite chatter fill the space, but inside a decision was taking root, deep and unyielding. For 33 years, I'd carried James's shame, let it stain my name, my life, my place in Franklin. I'd lost my job at the library, my friends at First Baptist, my dignity in the aisles of Piggly Wiggly, all to keep him free. And now, he and Lydia were plotting to strip me of what little I had left. My 1,200 square foot home, my $200,000 savings, my right to exist. No more. I wasn't their vault anymore. I was Eleanor Brooks, and I was done swallowing glass. The next morning, I called Clara. She met me at the corner diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of Franklin, where the coffee was strong and the booths were private. I slid into the cracked vinyl seat, my hands still trembling from the night before. Clara sat across from me, her gray curls pinned back, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Eleanor," she said, stirring her coffee, "you look like you're carrying a storm. Let it out." I took a breath, the kind that burns your lungs, and told her everything. Not just the slap, not just the plot I'd overheard, but the weight of 1992, when I told the police the drugs were mine to save James from a felony. Her face didn't change, but her hand tightened around her mug. "I know," she said softly. "I've always known." I froze, my coffee untouched. "What do you mean, Clara?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn cassette tape, its label faded but unmistakable. "You told me one night, 10 years ago, at my kitchen table," she said. "You were breaking, Eleanor, and I couldn't let you carry it alone. So I recorded it. Kept it in my safe, waiting for the day you'd be ready." My heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear and fury. "You recorded me?" I whispered, not angry but stunned. Clara leaned forward, her voice steady. "Only because I knew you'd never tell it again, and the world needs to hear it, Eleanor. They need to know who you are." I stared at that tape, a tiny piece of plastic holding the truth I'd buried for 33 years. It wasn't just evidence, it was my life, my sacrifice, my pain. I thought of James, laughing as Lydia planned to lock me away. I thought of the neighbors who'd shunned me, the church ladies who'd turned their backs. And I thought of myself, scrubbing floors to pay for James's college, selling my mother's candlesticks to keep him fed. "I am done protecting him," I said, my voice low but ironclad. "I want the truth out, Clara, all of it." She nodded, her lips curling into a fierce smile. "Then let's make it loud." I called Pastor William that afternoon. He'd been at First Baptist for decades, a man who'd seen Franklin's secrets and never flinched. "Eleanor," he said when I arrived at his office, "you sound like a woman who's ready to move mountains." I sat across from him, my hands folded, my pearls catching the light. "Not mountains," I said. "Just lies. I need your help to make things right." I told him about the tape, the slap, the plot. He listened, his eyes kind but steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. "What do you want, Eleanor?" he asked. "Justice or peace?" I didn't hesitate. "I want the truth, and I want it to be heard." We planned it then, a family dinner at my house, not the Willow, where I'd serve the truth alongside my peach scones. Pastor William agreed to come, to witness, to speak if needed. I called my lawyer next, a quiet man who'd handled my husband's estate years ago. "Pull my will," I said. "We're rewriting it. Every cent goes to kids who need a second chance, not the ones who spit on the first." As I hung up, I felt it, a fire kindling in my chest, not rage, but resolve. The truth was no longer a chain. It was my shield, my sword, and I was ready to wield it at a table set for reckoning. The dining room in my 200-square-foot home in Franklin, Tennessee, glowed under the soft light of my grandmother's chandelier, but the warmth was a lie. I'd spent 2 days preparing for this family dinner, not at the Willow, but here, on my own turf, where every scuff on the hardwood told a story of sacrifice. The table was set with my best china, white with delicate gold roses, each plate a silent witness to the years I'd poured into James, Lydia, and their kids. I'd baked peach scones, whipped up rosemary quiche, and arranged lemon tartlets with cream dollops as perfect as my resolve. My navy dress hugged my frame, the scalloped collar crisp, my mother's pearl brooch pinned like armor. This wasn't a meal. It was a reckoning. James swaggered in, his $500 blazer slung over one shoulder, tossing his car keys on my sideboard like he owned the place. Lydia followed, her heels clicking, her smile as sharp as a paper cut. "Eleanor, this spread is darling," she cooed, snapping a photo for her Instagram, probably already captioning it with some nonsense about family love. My grandkids shuffled in, earbuds dangling, barely glancing up from their phones. Clara Hayes took her seat beside me, her gray curls pinned tight, her eyes glinting with the same fire I'd seen at the Willow. Pastor William arrived last, his presence calm but heavy, like a storm cloud waiting to break. I'd invited him not as a guest, but as a witness. We ate in a buzz of small talk. Lydia, bragging about her new skincare line, James boasting about a deal that had net him $50,000. I nodded, smiled, passed the scones, but my heart was a furnace, burning with 33 years of buried truth. When the plates were cleared, I stood, my hands steady, despite the pulse hammering in my throat. "I have something for each of you," I said, my voice smooth as the Tennessee River but sharp as its undercurrent. I handed out cream-colored envelopes, each name written in my careful cursive: James, Lydia, the kids. They took them, curious, expecting checks or sentimental trinkets. Instead, they found a photo of James at 12, handcuffed in a Franklin police station, a 1992 police report listing cocaine, possession with intent to distribute, and a notarized transcript of the cassette tape where I'd confessed to Clara that I took the blame to save him. The room went still, like the air before a tornado. James's face drained of color, his fingers clutching the photo like it might bite. "What is this, Mom?" he stammered, his voice cracking like thin ice. Lydia's smile froze, her tartlet tumbling to the table, cream smearing her plate. "Eleanor, this is ridiculous," she snapped, but her eyes darted to the transcript, her hands trembling as she read my words. The drugs were mine. I said it to save him. My grandkids, for once, put their phones down, their wide eyes flicking between their father and me, confused, betrayed. Clara sat silent, her chin lifted, her presence a steel rod beside me. Pastor William folded his hands, his gaze steady, waiting. "I gave you a future, James," I said, my voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. "When you were 12, I stood in that police station and lied to keep you out of juvie. I lost my job, my friends, my name so you could have a life, and you repaid me with a slap at my birthday with plans to steal my home." James shook his head, his voice rising. "This is a lie. You're twisting it to hurt me." Lydia jumped in, her tone shrill. "She's manipulating us, James. She's always been dramatic." But the papers in their hands were undeniable, the truth as heavy as the oak table between us. I didn't flinch. "You forgot who I was," I said, looking straight at James. "But I haven't. I carried your shame for 33 years. And I'm done." The kids whispered, "Dad, is it true?" James slammed his fist on the table, the china rattling. Don't listen to her. She's lost it. But his voice shook, and his eyes betrayed him. He knew the truth, and it was eating him alive. Lydia clutched her envelope, her face pale, her usual poise crumbling like stale bread. Clara leaned forward, her voice quiet but lethal. You should have thanked her, James. Instead, you broke her. I sat down, folding my hands, letting the silence choke them. The truth wasn't just out. It was a wildfire, and I'd lit the match. But this was only the beginning. I'd bared my soul to my family, but Franklin needed to hear it too. The church gala was in 2 days, and with Clara and Pastor William by my side, I'd make sure the town that shunned me knew the price I'd paid and the strength I'd found. 2 days after I laid the truth bare at my dining room table, I stood in the fellowship hall of First Baptist Church in Franklin, Tennessee. The air thick with the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls. The church gala, an annual event where Franklin's finest gathered to raise funds for the youth program, was in full swing. The room buzzed with chatter, the clink of donation envelopes, and the rustle of Sunday best dresses, but I felt like I was standing on a tightrope. One wrong step from falling into the abyss. I wore my ivory knit dress, pearls at the collar, not for show, but to remind myself who I was before this town turned its back on me. Clara Hayes stood to my left, her hand brushing mine, a quiet anchor in the storm. Pastor William was at the podium, his voice warm as he thanked the crowd, but his eyes kept flicking to me, steady and sure, like he knew the thunder was coming. I'd invited the local press, reporters from the Franklin Herald and a Nashville TV crew, under the guise of covering the gala's record-breaking donations. They didn't know they were about to witness a reckoning. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the fire of 33 years of silence, finally breaking free. James and Lydia were there, too, sitting near the front, their faces tight with forced smiles. They thought they could ride out the storm I'd unleashed at my dinner, thought they could bury the truth under charm and lies. But I wasn't the same Eleanor Brooks who'd swallowed pain to protect them. I was a woman forged in sacrifice, and tonight Franklin would see me. Pastor William paused his speech, adjusting his glasses. "Folks, we have a special moment tonight," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a sermon. "Eleanor Brooks has something to share." The room hushed, heads turning, eyes curious but edged with judgment. I stepped to the podium, my heels clicking on the polished floor, each step a defiance of the whispers that had haunted me since 1992. I didn't look at James or Lydia. I looked at the crowd, neighbors who'd shunned me, church ladies who'd stopped inviting me to potlucks, faces that had once called me friend. "I've lived in Franklin for 40 years, I began, my voice steady, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. And 33 years ago, I made a choice that changed my life. My son, James, was 12, caught with cocaine, facing a felony that would have destroyed him. I stood in a police station and said the drugs were mine. Gasps rippled through the room, spoons clattering against coffee cups. I held up the cassette tape Clara had kept, its plastic casing glinting under the lights. This is my confession, recorded a decade ago. I took the blame, lost my job, my friends, my place in this town, so James could have a future. I nodded to Pastor William, who pressed play on a small recorder. My voice, younger but unmistakable, filled the hall. The drugs were mine. I said it to save him. The crowd froze, some leaning forward, others clutching their purses. James stood, his face ashen, his $500 blazer crumpled. "Mom, stop this!" he shouted, his voice cracking like a boy's. Lydia grabbed his arm, hissing, "Sit down, James!" She's making a fool of herself. But the tape kept playing, my words from 2015 echoing. I lost everything to protect him, and he never even asked what it cost. I looked straight at James, my eyes burning. "I gave you a life, James. I sold my mother's candlesticks, skipped doctor visits, scrubbed floors to pay for your college, and you slapped me at my birthday, planned to take my home, my $200,000 savings, my dignity, the crowd murmured, heads shaking. Mrs. Carter, who'd once snubbed me at Piggly Wiggly, dabbed her eyes. Another woman, a former co-worker, whispered, "We didn't know, Eleanor." I didn't soften. "You didn't ask," I said, my voice sharp but calm. "You judged, you whispered, you turned away. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not here to shame my son. I'm here to free myself." Lydia stood, her face twisted. "This is a stunt. She's lying to ruin us." But her voice faltered as Pastor William held up the notarized transcript, his expression unyielding. "The truth doesn't lie, Lydia," he said, his voice booming like scripture. The reporter scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. James sank into his chair, his hands covering his face, the weight of his own choices crushing him. Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes misted, but proud. The crowd was silent, some crying, others bowing their heads, as if my truth had cracked open their own. I stepped back, my pearls catching the light, my heart lighter than it had been in decades. I'd bared my soul to Franklin, and the town that had shunned me now saw me, really saw me. But this wasn't the end. I had one more step to take, one final act to claim my freedom. As I left the podium, Clara whispered, "You did it, Eleanor. You're free." I nodded, feeling the first rays of a new dawn. In 2 days, I'd board a train to Charleston, leaving behind the ashes of my old life for something new. The morning sun spilled over Franklin, Tennessee, painting the train station in hues of gold and promise as I stood on the platform, my suitcase at my side, a green silk scarf tied loosely around my neck. 2 days had passed since I stood at the First Baptist Church gala, my voice tearing through 33 years of silence, exposing the truth about the sacrifice I made for James in 1992. The weight of that night, James's slap, Lydia's scheming, the town's judgment, had lifted, not with a crash, but like mist burning off the Cumberland River at dawn. I wasn't the same Eleanor Brooks who'd scrubbed floors to pay for James's college, who'd sold her mother's candlesticks to keep him fed. I was a woman reborn, my heart no longer a vault, but a window, open to a future I'd claim for myself. Clara Hayes stood beside me, her gray curls catching the breeze, her eyes misty but bright. She'd been my rock through it all, through the slap at the Willow, the dinner where I laid out the truth, the gala where Franklin finally saw me. "You're not just leaving, Eleanor," she said, her voice warm as the coffee we'd shared at the corner diner. "You're flying." I smiled, my pearls glinting under the morning light, and squeezed her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you, Clara. You kept my truth safe when I couldn't." She shook her head, her laugh soft but fierce. "You kept yourself safe, honey. I just held the tape." The train to Charleston, South Carolina waited, its whistle a low hum, like a hymn calling me home. I'd signed up for an art class there, something I hadn't done since high school, when I dreamed of painting the Tennessee hills in watercolors. For years, I'd buried that dream under James's tuition bills, Lydia's demands, and Franklin's whispers. But now, at 68, I was choosing myself. My 1,200-square-foot house was on the market, the proceeds destined for a youth program that helped kids like James once was, kids who needed a second chance, not a mother's silence. My $200,000 savings were safe, redirected to scholarships, with Clara overseeing every cent to ensure James and Lydia couldn't touch it. As I handed my ticket to the conductor, I caught a glimpse of James across the platform. He stood alone, his $500 blazer wrinkled, his face hollow, like a man who'd lost something he couldn't name. He'd called me last night, his voice trembling. "Mom, can we talk? I didn't mean for things to go this far." I'd listened, my heart steady, and said, "You had 33 years to talk, James. You chose silence. Now I'm choosing me." I hung up, not with anger, but with peace, the kind that comes when you stop carrying someone else's shame. Lydia hadn't called. She'd posted a cryptic Instagram story about family drama, but the comments were brutal. Franklin had seen the truth, and her mask was slipping. The train's engine rumbled, and I turned to Clara one last time. "What if I'm too old for this?" I asked, my voice soft, a flicker of doubt creeping in. She gripped my shoulders, her eyes fierce. "Eleanor Brooks, you're not too old to live. You're just starting. Paint those Charleston sunsets like you were born for it." I laughed, a real laugh, the first in years, and boarded the train, my scarf fluttering like a flag of freedom. The platform faded as we pulled away, Franklin shrinking in the distance, its gossip and guilt no longer mine to bear. I settled into my seat, the window framing fields of green and gold. For the first time in decades, I felt light, like the girl who'd once sketched wildflowers in a Franklin meadow. The truth hadn't just freed me, it had given me wings. But there was one last thing to say, one final gift to leave behind for anyone who'd ever felt erased. As the train rolled toward Charleston, I opened my notebook, ready to share a lesson I'd learned the hard way, a lesson for anyone still holding their silence. As the train to Charleston hummed along, the fields outside my window blurred into a tapestry of green and gold, like the life I was finally reclaiming. I'd spent 33 years carrying James's secret, letting Franklin's whispers and my family's betrayal carve away pieces of me. The slap at the Willow, Lydia's plot to steal my $200,000 savings, the cold shoulders at Piggly Wiggly, they'd tried to erase me. But standing at that church gala, with Clara Hayes by my side, and Pastor William's voice echoing my truth, I learned something that changed everything. Love isn't silence. It's not sacrificing your name, your dreams, your voice to keep others comfortable. It's standing tall, even when your knees shake, and saying, "I am enough." I'm 68 now, and I'm painting again, letting Charleston's sunsets teach me what freedom feels like. If you're holding a truth that's breaking you, let it out. Don't wait 33 years like I did. Your worth isn't in what you give away, it's in what you claim for yourself. If my story touched you, please like this video, leave a comment with your own truth, and subscribe to Voices of Mother Ruth. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice matters, and so do you.